Jim Parsons had everything: fame, money, power that a character loved across the world, that a paycheck most actors can't even dream of. And then he walked away. Not slowly, not reluctantly, but decisively, at the exact moment when staying would have made him tens of millions more. So, the question isn't just why did he leave? The real question is, what scared him enough to say no? At the height of his career, Jim Parsons wasn't just another TV actor, he was television. His portrayal of Sheldon Cooper in The Big Bang Theory had become iconic, so iconic that the entire show revolved around him. Ratings were massive. Nearly 18 million viewers tuned in per episode. Networks didn't just want the show to continue, they needed it too. And Jim, he was being paid $1 million per episode, every single time. Year after year, he was ranked among the highest-paid actors in the world. The kind of success that most people spend a lifetime chasing and never reach. Then came the offer. 2 more seasons, a deal that could push his earnings even higher, reportedly around $50 million. All he had to do was keep going. Stay in the same role, wear the same shirts, stand on the same stage, be Sheldon just a little longer. But instead of signing the contract, Jim Parsons said no. At first, it didn't make sense. Why would anyone walk away from that? From global fame, from guaranteed success, from a role that had already defined a generation? The answer didn't come from a single moment. It came from a series of events, all crashing into each other during one brutal stretch of time. The summer of 2018. A summer that changed everything. It started with something deeply personal. Jim and his husband, Todd Spiewak, had 2 dogs. They weren't just pets, they were family. Companions who had been with them for over a decade, through the rise, the fame, the chaos. One of those dogs was 14 years old, and dying. At the same time, Jim's schedule was completely out of control. He was performing on Broadway, 8 shows a week in The Boys in the Band. At the same time, he was flying back to Los Angeles to film The Big Bang Theory, then flying back again to New York just to repeat the cycle. No rest, no pause, no room to breathe. And somewhere in the middle of all that, his dog was slipping away. There was one moment that stayed with him. A simple walk in the park. His dog looked weak, fragile, different. Jim knew what was coming, but he didn't have time to process it. There were commitments, contracts, people depending on him. His husband reminded him they couldn't just cancel everything. Too many people had already adjusted their schedules around him. And that's when it hit him. Not the fame, not the pressure, but the realization that he wasn't there when it mattered most. He broke down, right there, because no amount of success could change that moment. No amount of money could give that time back. The next day, they made the decision no pet owner ever wants to make. They said goodbye, at home, quietly, and just like that, a piece of his life, one that had been there long before the fame, was gone. For most people, that would be enough to take a step back. To pause, to breathe. But Jim didn't have that option, because just days later, something else happened. He was back on stage in New York, performing, delivering, doing what he always did. And then, he fractured his foot, badly, the kind of injury that should stop everything, the kind of injury that forces you to rest. But he didn't stop. He finished the performance, in pain, then went to the hospital afterward. That's when a different kind of fear set in, not emotional this time, physical, real. He realized something most people don't think about until it's too late. The body breaks, without warning, without permission. And for someone like him, an actor, that was terrifying, because his entire career depended on it. What if he couldn't perform anymore? What if he couldn't go back on stage? What if everything he had built just ended? He recovered. He went back to work, but the thought never left him. And then came the moment that changed everything. Not a dramatic event, not a sudden crisis, just a number. Jim Parsons turned 45 in 2018, and that's when he started doing math. His father had died at 52. Suddenly, the future didn't feel infinite anymore. It felt limited. If he followed the same timeline, if life played out the same way, how much time did he actually have left? 10 years, 7, maybe less? Now, imagine that thought sitting in your mind while someone offers you a contract that locks you into the same routine for several more years. Same role, same schedule, same life. And suddenly the question changes. It's no longer, do I want more money? It becomes, do I want to spend my remaining time doing this? That question haunted him, because it wasn't about success anymore. It was about time. And time is the one thing you can't earn back. Meanwhile, another part of his life was being ignored. Years earlier, Jim and Todd had started a production company together. That's Wonderful Productions. It had potential, real potential. They had deals lined up, ideas ready to go. But Jim never had time for it. He was always filming, always performing, always somewhere else. Todd wanted to build something new, create something meaningful. But Jim was stuck in a cycle he couldn't escape. And the workload just kept growing. Television, Broadway, a Netflix series, commercial contracts, different scripts, different characters, different cities, no stability, just constant motion. At some point his body had enough, his mind had enough, and deep down, he had enough. The answer became clear, not overnight, not easily, but undeniably. It was time to stop. In August 2018, Jim Parsons returned to Los Angeles carrying a decision he had been wrestling with for weeks. He knew what he had to do. So he went to see Chuck Lorre, the co-creator of The Big Bang Theory, the man who helped build the show into a global phenomenon. They sat down, and Jim told him he wasn't coming back. No seasons 13 and 14. No extensions. No negotiations. Just done. Chuck Lorre understood immediately. He didn't argue, didn't try to convince him, because deep down he knew something important. The show couldn't exist without Sheldon Cooper, and Sheldon Cooper couldn't exist without Jim Parsons. A few days later, Jim gathered the cast, the people he had spent over a decade working with, the people who had become family, and he told them the same thing. There were tears, shock, silence. Some felt blindsided. Others understood immediately, because even if they didn't say it out loud, many of them were feeling the same exhaustion. Shortly after the announcement was made, season 12 would be the last. Not because ratings dropped, not because the stories ran out, but because one person made a choice. And just like that, one of the biggest shows in television history was over. But the story doesn't end there. Because even after everything, people still asked, was it worth it? Walking away from that kind of money, that kind of fame, that kind of legacy. The truth is, the famous $50 million offer wasn't exactly what it seemed. There were discussions, negotiations, possibilities, but no finalized deal. Jim didn't walk away from a signed contract. He walked away before it ever got that far. Because by that point, he had already made peace with his decision. And in a way, it made sense. Sheldon Cooper's story had reached its natural conclusion. He had grown, changed, evolved. He won the Nobel Prize, found love, built real friendships. It was complete. And sometimes, the hardest thing to do is to let something end when it's still successful. The finale aired to massive numbers. Millions watched. A global audience saying goodbye, not just to a show, but to a character that had become part of their lives. And Jim, he moved on, not away from acting, but toward something different. More films, more theater, more creative control, more life outside of one role. Years later, people still wonder, did he make the right choice? Did he leave too early? Should he have stayed just a little longer? But when asked, Jim Parsons has always given the same answer. No regret, because for him, it was never about the money. It was never about the fame. It was about time, about knowing when something has run its course, about recognizing that success doesn't mean staying forever. Sometimes it means walking away, and maybe that's the real reason this story matters. Not because a famous actor left a successful show, but because he did something most people are too afraid to do. He chose change over comfort. Uncertainty over routine, life over repetition, and in the end, That decision might have been the most important role he ever played. So now the question shifts to you. If you were in his position, would you have stayed, or would you have walked away too?